So we are going to continue on the electrification topic. So I'd like to call up all of the panelists. This is really where things get crazy because this is a completely oversubscribed panel. But we have Professor Charlie Fine to lead us through a discussion, not on the battery side, but on the infrastructure side. So specifically, the charging infrastructure, the energy infrastructure for the new world. We can just... Charlie Fine is a professor at the Sloan School of Management. He is one of the early leaders in the International Motor Vehicle Program that was developed here at MIT with other folks like in the room, like Jim Womack and Dan Roos. Charlie was also the president and CEO of the Asia School of Business in Kuala Lumpur. He's the author of many, many books on the automotive industry and mobility in general. And so, Charlie, the floor is yours to introduce the panel, and let's talk about electric infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So we have a very, very impressive and large panel today to address a broad range of issues in electrification infrastructure. And as we've sort of heard already, the Chinese are kind of ahead of the Americans in electric infrastructure for charging stations. Europeans are kind of ahead of America as well. We've got automotive companies in the United States that are going to pump out lots and lots of electric vehicles, and maybe the Chinese are going to send a lot over here, et cetera. But we don't really have the charging infrastructure that's ready yet. And so this is a panel to really talk about a broad range of issues related to putting together the electric infrastructure for a charging station so that when these electric vehicles are rolled out in high volumes, we have the capability to charge them. So the way we've done this is, so we had 7 and one person missed his flight. So we have 6 on our panel. And I'm going to just give the names of the speakers, their titles, and the order in which we're going to go. And I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, their organizations, and share their initial thoughts. We've asked each one of them to share a few thoughts. Then we'll have some discussion amongst the panel, and then we'll have some discussion amongst the whole group. Okay. So our first speaker is going to be Kameale Terry, who's the founder and CEO of ChargerHelp. Then second will be Tiya Gordon, co-founder and COO of itselectric. Then we'll have Alex Gruzen, CEO of WiTricity. Then we'll have Khaled Fakhuri, Senior VP at Schneider Electric. And finally, we'll have Katie Rowen, SVP, Katie Rowen, SVP, Chief Legal and Sustainability Officer at Vontier. And then finally, we'll have Sejal Shah, Senior Advisor, U.S. DOT Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. So we're going to get 6 views, and then we're going to try to have some discussion amongst those 6 views. So without further ado, I'll ask Kameale to start us off.
Sure. So I actually started out in this space at a company called EV Connect. We made software for EV charging stations, and I was something called EV driver support. So shortly put, when lovely EV drivers got to show up places and stations didn't work, I got to hear how they really felt. And I took it to heart, and I got really obsessed with understanding why, when we integrated software with the built environment, why were there issues? And most importantly, when we looked at dashboards, why did those stations show up as online and available when in fact they weren't? And so at ChargerHelp, what we've gotten really, really obsessed with is around interoperability. What happens when you put in different types of software into one device that is out in the public and you expect for it to seamlessly work, right? What happens when that software in the charging station has to properly communicate to the software and the hardware, to properly communicate to the cloud, to the payment system, to the connector, to the vehicle, and then all of those entities are different customers. And some of the top 3 things that we've seen, which I'll be happy to get into later, are just some of the nuances. One of the things that's been most interesting to me, there's a protocol that's primarily used by most of the industry called Open Charge Point Protocol. And in that protocol, what we've seen is that different folks define status states differently. So much so that we'll see sometimes where one entity is showing something as online, another entity that is on top of that software shows it as unavailable. We also have found that with the state of statuses, there's also times where the station actually shows up with a missing status internally, but when you look externally on the device, it shows up as available. The other thing that's been quite interesting, which I will say that the federal government has done a great job of putting together a ChargeX consortium on, are error codes. In OCBP early on, I have heard upwards of like 30 error codes, but only 10 were required. And so when you start to experience issues of the charging infrastructure, you actually would get a subset of other error. And other error used to come up at least 80% of the time. And when you got an other error code, there wasn't any type of direct actions that you could take towards it. And then the last thing that's actually been like very, very interesting to me recently is that we found certain cars, car OEMs getting essentially stuck at dealerships because they're not able to operate on a specific hardware manufacturer. And this has been really interesting because folks will test the cars with the charging infrastructure in a lab, but when they maybe put out a new firmware update, for some reason, that car is no longer understood by the charging infrastructure. And so at ChargerHelp, we've done a lot of work around field service interactions and field service data. We've gathered over 18,000 field service interactions to date, and we like to build from the bottom up to study how these softwares are working with one another, how did we solve it, and can we build out predictive models. But super happy to be helpful and share some of the insights we've learned this past year. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really interesting start for us to hear some of those challenges. Next, let me ask Tiya Gordon. Go ahead, Tiya.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So my name is Tiya Gordon. I am the co-founder and COO of itselectric. We are curbside charging specifically built for cities. We're here to solve the biggest problems that cities face in the deployment of public charging. My favorite sort of piece of cocktail chatter that I like to go to these days is that we need 1.2 million more public non-residential chargers in this country by 2030. And of that 1.2 million, NREL is saying that 1 million of those need to be level 2. And so given the barriers that cities face in the deployment of public charging, how do we get there? And so itselectric is the world's first public curbside charging system, which is powered by buildings, which means that we avoid all of the difficulties that cities face when they need to basically not only rely, but directly coordinate with utility. Because we pull power from adjacent buildings to power a public curbside charger, and in exchange, we revenue share back to that building. What this allows us to do is to have universal urban siting of chargers, wherever cities have their priorities for chargers, because we're not reliant on conduit, we're not reliant on inter-utility connections, so we can really deploy wherever cities want to see those chargers in their municipalities. And Charlie told me to have 3 points in 3 minutes, so I'm going to try and keep to that. And my third point is that we strongly believe that the US should start to adopt the model of detachable cables in their charging solutions. This is for a few reasons. Number one, as we learned from someone who's near and dear to us, Kameale, cables are the first component that breaks on public chargers. People charge and then they mic drop, and then the clip breaks off, and then that charger is down, sometimes for months. Even if you have a modular replacement component, you can't really get someone out there on the spot to replace that area. The other advantage of this is that we keep streets free of cables when a car is not charging, so this is really important for the urban fabric. And the third idea and foundation behind the detachable cable is that we can have universal compatibility, interoperability. So NACS drivers keep the NACS cable in their car, CCS drivers keep the CCS cable in their car. Maybe we'll have a universal standard in the next few years, maybe we won't, maybe it'll be a little bit of a war. But I do have a detachable cable, you didn't know it was right here in my bag the whole time. So if you want to come and check out a detachable cable, come talk to me. Thank you.
You could just hold it up and show it.
With pleasure.
Have detachable cable will travel.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. Everyone should have one of these in their bag, right? Okay, thank you very much, Tiya. So next up we have Alex, CEO of WiTricity.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Alex Gruzen. I'm the CEO of WiTricity. And that couldn't have been a more perfect setup for what we do at WiTricity. We eliminate that cable. You don't need it at all, right? So WiTricity is all about wireless charging of EVs. We came out of the physics department at MIT and went through the journey that a lot of university spin-outs do. You pioneer technology, you do a lot of proof of concept work, you evolve the technology. We then shifted into the sort of licensing, developing reference platforms and tech transfer. Became very clear to the company about 10 years ago, we had something really special for electric cars. We could move a lot of power very efficiently at a distance with a lot of positional flexibility. And by 2017, we focused all in on EVs. We were working in many different spaces, but 2017, the market was moving. It was time to focus and go execute. And the last few years have been turning us from a licensing company into a product company, into a full tier 1 supplier to the auto industry. So we have pilot products and some production products in the market that came out of a licensing model. It wasn't moving fast enough. So we bit the bullet, we've built a global supply chain with partners, and we've really completely finished out the designs and now won multiple OEM contracts and are marching to production with WiTricity product being sold and integrated onto OEM vehicles from global automaker brands you would know that'll be coming out in the next few years, in particular around 26 and 27. So I came out of the PC industry where I could do 3 products a year, and now I'm in the auto industry where this summer I'm delivering our B samples for qualification for products in 26 and 27. So it's been an exciting journey, but it's important, why does this matter? Because charging is still a pretty awful experience. And while it's necessary, I believe sort of for long distance travel, and I applaud all the investment that's taking place in the highway corridor electrification and the government support of making that happen so people are willing to buy EVs. What we found is that, like every technology in your life that has gone wireless, could go wireless, has gone wireless. We don't plug into blue Ethernet cables at a conference room table anymore. My kids don't even think of that cordless phone as a cordless phone. It's just a phone, right? I remember when it had a cord. And this, the most significant new technology platform coming into our lives is the EV. And yet we're going backwards. We're adding a cord to a place where one never existed before. So when we talk to consumers, when we do significant multi-thousand customer surveys and research, we think we can increase the attach rate, or rather the adoption of EVs by up to 68% when we show them wireless charging. It's just a better experience. So what I want you to think about is if I just park my car and I walk away and I come back to it and it's charged, and then I drive it and I park it and I drive it and I park it, and I never think about charging, it's like having an infinite range car. So my goal is that the only time you ever think about plugging in is I'm driving, to grandma's house, or I'm driving LA to San Francisco, and you need a charge along the way. That day to day, 95% of the driving we'll do is within the range of the vehicles, and I never ever think about charging. And the last thing I'll add is that everything that we do is bidirectional, right? So I really am trying to build an energy cloud where vehicles are available whenever they're parked and not reliant upon the user having plugged in. And I think we can double or triple availability of that battery to the utilities and really increase the value beyond the examples that have been given. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a really exciting vision. Do you want to hold up and show your wireless cable? That was great. Thank you. So next, Khaled, please.
Yes, so I work for a company called Schneider Electric. We are in energy management and industrial automation. The part of the business I'm in is called Innovation at the Edge. And what we do is build the future businesses of Schneider Electric. We do it via innovative business models. We do it via development, R&D internally, but also in working with the ecosystem, whether through our corporate venture capital fund or through working with incubations, early stage startups. One of the main things that I'm responsible for is what we call the prosumer business, which includes the topic that we're covering on today here is about the infrastructure for EV charging. We talked a bit here about public charging And just one statistic to know that in 2023, 78% of the chargers that are sold or installed are actually happening in single-family homes in the US. That percentage is projected to continue to be above 70% by the year 2030. Just think about the scale of what's happening on electric vehicle adoption, and I'll get to the point of friction that you talked about, Alex, here. Today in the US, less than 2% of vehicles in circulations are electric vehicles. That's projected to go to about 12 to 15% by the year 2030. So we're moving, in Europe it's not that much better, it's less than 4%, although there is some difference between different countries. So put together, there is less than 17 million circulation going up sixfold over the next 7 years to be above 100. Bring this to the home now. When you're charging, we're 78% today in the US, the charging is happening at home. The average home in the US pulls between 100 to 200 amps of power into the panel. An electric vehicle charger that is level 2 is between 30 and 50 amps. So that's fine if it's the only load that you're bringing into your home, but we all know that there are other appliances that are connected. What this means is that a lot of the existing electrical installations that were not designed to absorb the EV load that is coming, as well as other electrifications like induction, like heat pumps, et cetera, are introducing a big challenge and opportunity on how we upgrade these panels and how we make sure that the utilities don't have to provide more capacity than actually needed by leveraging existing technology related to home energy management systems. We install via some of the portfolio companies that we've acquired as part of this innovation at the edge mechanism that we have, a company that does electric vehicle installations via an Uber model where the electricians are actually not employees of the company, but they're like private electricians like Uber drivers are. And through that, we do more than 40,000 installations of EV chargers a year. More than half of them require a panel upgrade, and a big portion of that require a utility service upgrade. We feel that there is a lot of misutilized capacity in the homes by just automatically going and upgrading these panels rather than managing the demands and the home energy utilization more effectively. One thing that I really liked hearing, Christina, when you mentioned the virtual power plants. These batteries that are roaming the streets are not just for the driving. They are, once accessible via the bidirectional charging, as Alex was mentioning, these are power components to a power plant that you can aggregate with software that already exists. And one of the portfolio companies we acquired is in that space specifically, and rolling them into the demand response of the programs for utilities significantly reduce the amount of infrastructure spend that needs to happen in our markets.
Thank you. That's an exciting vision, and you're more in the scaling stage at this point, it seems like. Okay, thank you. So next, maybe I can ask Katie. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sure, happy to. Hi, Katie Rowen, Vontier. So we're an industrial technology company really focused on automation and productivity across the mobility ecosystem and play across, I think, sort of differently maybe than most on the stage, this kind of multi-energy landscape. We're in electrification for sure, and I'm going to talk a bit about that, but also compressed natural gas, renewable natural gas, hydrogen, petrol, diesel, above ground, below ground, grid management, battery management, and electrification. So we come to the table with sort of a unique point of lens across that multi-energy sort of landscape in the macro environment. I would say, we've got a business called Evolve, and underneath that we have several brands, namely the largest one is Drives. You were talking about sort of that interoperability, and that's really what Drives is all about, that connective tissue between and amongst networks. And a lot of the folks that are on the stage have touched on the challenges across the charging infrastructure, and there are so many we could spend an entire day here kind of dissecting them, and truly the consumer experience is pretty miserable, as you noted. And so Drives in particular is very focused on solving for a lot of those challenges, both for kind of charge point operators and other companies, and also ultimately for the consumers to facilitate adoption. And it's everything from the challenges with payments and roaming and cross-border activity and different tariffs, and self-healing algorithms to deal with sort of uptime and maintenance issues. For those of us who are really interested in the electrification infrastructure and so like to experiment when we go on road trips with our families, it's a real test to your marriage. As you're pulling up to these different charging sites, and many times it's a miserable experience. The chargers don't work, the payments are confusing. There's a real safety issue for a lot of people if you're pulling up to a bank of chargers and they're not affiliated or attached to some other convenience store or something that's open with people that are around and it's well lit. Many people don't feel safe stopping, particularly in the evening, and charging by themselves. I know I certainly have had that experience myself as a driver. So, we're happy to sort of play a part in solving a lot of these really important problems, and ultimately, to facilitate adoption at the end of the day and help decarbonize transportation.
Thank you. And so our last comment, Sejal, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sejal Shah with the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. So we're not just U.S. DOT, as it says on the screen, but we are a federal office that was created by the BIL, the IIJA, many acronyms, but it's the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And so we sit between the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation, because electric transportation requires both of those to work together. And so that is what we're doing. We're playing that role to make sure that both agencies understand the role the other plays in this market, and what they can do and what we can do, the three agencies together now, to help accelerate electric transportation. So our mission is twofold. One is to help accelerate and make sure that everyone can drive electric. So there's multiple funding opportunities, as you guys are all aware, from NEVI, which is the National Electric Vehicle Corridor Program, and then there's CFI, which is the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program, which is for communities. So we at the Joint Office provide technical assistance to the administrators for that program, which is FHWA. We have a huge TA team of about 10 people now, so that's huge for us, since we're only about 18 months old, that is supporting all of the DOTs across the states to roll out NEVI, roll out CFI. And then to the the conversation on stage related to reliability, we have a funding opportunity available at the moment to replace chargers that are broken to ensure the near-term viability of these chargers. But we've also developed and helped FHWA craft the NEVI requirements, the minimum requirements, so that reliability for these chargers and the standards that go with it will carry on. We are also leading efforts with the ChargeX consortium to create industry standards relate to reliability, interoperability, and all of the wonderful words and things that are needed to keep this market moving so that we don't have to have another FOA again to replace broken chargers. I'll stop my comments there so that we have time for questions.
All right, thank you. So I actually want to pose something to the group before we open it up, which is the following. So my paternal grandfather passed away at age 96 about 30 years ago. He relayed to me the story of the first, and he grew up in a rural farming area in Massachusetts. He relayed to me the story of the first time they got electricity to their house. That he lived on a street. There was electricity on the main street, but there was a couple of miles to go down the road to their farm, and they didn't have electricity for some of his childhood. And at some point, electricity was put in. And listening to some of you talk, it's sort of like, are we at that stage again, right? That in some sense, we're rewiring, not wiring isn't the right word, obviously, but we're rethinking the electric infrastructure of the country in some sense, and we're not reaching, we're reaching into places we haven't had to reach before with capacity that we haven't had to have before, sort of like what my grandfather's family felt 100 years ago or so. And I just wonder, and then I think about some of the companies represented here and some of the activities are really startup activities and we all know that startup companies go through periods of pain, that exploration where we are uncertain about how are things going to go. We try this, we're going to try that. There's a lot of experimentation that goes on. My sense is the large automotive companies, they're not startups. They kind of know how to produce cars in high volume, and they've sort of figured out how to produce electric vehicles in high volume. But the charging station industry is this startup industry that's trying to get up to speed to be available for the automotive industry that can produce the vehicles in volume. And so we have this sort of mismatch where the startup charging infrastructure people are still kind of trying to nail it, trying to figure out, gee, how do we get this system to work, and what are the right standards, and how things are going to go. And there's going to be this period of struggle where how do we figure out the right business models? How do we figure out the right technologies? Is it going to be wired? Is it going to be wireless? Who's going to pay? Is it going to be bidirectional? How are we going to use the energy? Where's the energy going to come from? What kind of connectors do we need? What kind of panels do we need, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wonder how nobody explicitly talked, well, maybe Khaled more than others, about scaling this up. How are we going to get to scale so that we can provide the amount of electricity and the amount of chargers needed? What do you think about that? And how quickly can we scale, and what do we have to do in order to scale?
Could I jump in with one comment? Just
Right,
I'll leave aside the wireless, passion that I have, and just say that I'm actually equally focused on level 2, right? And that as a country, we need to get a focus on distributed charging where cars are parked. Right? I think it's even better when it's wireless, but let's just start with that. In the 60s and 70s, the grid was able to expand to deal with the arrival of central air conditioning, right? The same thing can happen again for the new loads of EVs. But I think the mindset is stuck in trying to recreate the gas station experience of the past. And we'll never get there. It's the equivalent of like 6 megawatts of power into a car to the equivalent of what it would be with gasoline. Right? So you're never going to equate that. The best case, it's still a subpar experience compared to what people are used to in the past. But we have something that didn't exist before. We didn't have a gas station in everyone's home or garage or where they park. But electricity is available. So I just think we have to get this mindset away from I'm going to go someplace to charge, and really have a focus, whether it's legislative and codes and availability and pre-wiring and all new construction and everything that we possibly can do to make simple charging where you park broadly available. Because as Khaled said, it can be managed, it can be part of the overall allocation of energy, doesn't create these crazy loads. The idea that one car in one parking spot at a fast charger is consuming what's consumed by 40, 50 homes, it's like insane to me, right? So yes, we need it for highway range extension, but it should not be the objective for what we do day to day for charging our vehicles.
And I think the other piece to this is like what we've been talking about here, like systems and ecosystems. Like, yes, car OEMs have been making cars for a very long time, but what we talked about earlier is that now we're thinking about software first. And I think one of the biggest like kind of like gaps right now that I've seen this past year in the industry is that we don't think about that as like the forefront thing, and how we have to collaborate with one another in order to have a successful experience and to scale properly. And to me, the reason why this is like a problem that we need to think more deeply about is because we are looking towards like smart cities and connected cities and getting software into the built environment. So I think that there is an opportunity for us to learn from one another, and then to get better at collaborating and not having every single thing that we produce be IP. At some point, right? Like, what is collaboration and data sharing will actually need to mean in order for us to properly scale without everything feeling like a competitive space.
Sejal, and then Tiya.
Yeah, I guess just to your point too is, yes, home charging is important, level 2 charging is important, and I think 82% of charging is done at home. But as EVs scale, I think half of our population does not have access to a dedicated parking spot.
I didn't say at home, I said where you park.
Yeah, but they don't have dedicated parking. So then that makes it a bit difficult where if you have on-street parking, if you don't have that dedicated parking spot, so then that is a place for public access charging to play a role.
Yeah, you want to go?
I'm going to say yes, yes, yes. And we have to talk about human behavior change. So I'm an outsider in this room. I don't come from transportation or energy. I come from design. And I'm approaching the solution to charging through a lens of design. So Matt Rogers, who founded the Nest, that kind of changed the way we work with thermostats in our homes, he had said in order for human behavior to change, you have to have humans recreate a behavior they're familiar with, but you have to make it better. So for EV charging, we need to look at it not from what we have been doing to fuel gas cars, where we're going to a gas station and we're going like this and we're putting it in our car and we're putting a noxious fuel from one container to another. But instead, we need to recreate another behavior that we all use every single day when we go home at night, which is plugging in our phone. So what if you could, again, charge your vehicle, but you're doing it not at a destination, but where you park, on street or in a garage. And so the more we can get this idea across, the better we can scale charging solutions. My parents, their daughter works in electric vehicle charging. They do not have an electric vehicle. They're terrified that they're never going to be able to charge it because of everything that's on the news. So we need to start these behavior changes. We need to start these conversations around how this is actually not a big deal. And that happens through the proliferation of ubiquitous charging, especially in cities where most drivers will need that solution when they don't have an off-street garage or parking spot.
Yeah, so, and I don't think it's an either or, right? I mean, you will have to have that solution across, whether at home, whether just where you park, but also in public, on the motorways, et cetera. Now, the mix and the human behavior are definitely factors for this. To go back to your point on how we scale, I'll just say, so from our example is for example, EV Connect, the first company I worked for, we acquired it as part of our portfolio specifically for that. For that reason is that to scale that, it needed a different kind of setup. Yet that innovation, the creativity that got it started would have taken a different shape within Schneider. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's better to leverage existing startups that their sole attention and priority was on solving one problem. And then when it gets to a certain level, it can pivot into a different part of the ecosystem and scale. And that's what we're doing with these smaller companies that start in a space that had a higher risk than an appetite of company and a business that's used to predictable earnings, et cetera. But now it gets to a level where that level of risk is a bet that a lot of larger companies are willing to take. And I see a lot of people at that scale doing these, making this move, which means it's becoming at a critical point in this industry that it's a no return. This is going to stay and it's going to accelerate.
Just the briefest of comments, I think just picking up on your comment about your parents and being afraid to charge, you know, the recent sort of consumer surveys of electric vehicle owners, and Tesla owners are an exception to it, but the majority of electric vehicle owners saying that they're not going to buy another electric vehicle. They're going to go back to an internal combustion engine vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, and that's a real problem, right? And so all of the challenges that we're talking about, you know, the speed with which we need to tackle them and the partnerships and the collaboration that you mentioned and that were mentioned on the earlier panel, I think are just so critical.
Just real quick, I will say it's been fascinating to see the change of EV Connect, because there are a lot of charge management system operators that are like, it's very hard to work with. They don't want to open up data to you. They don't want to do these things. But literally within the last year, EV Connect has transformed into an organization that it doesn't need to covet the whole driver experience. It is more collaborative. And it kind of hits on what I think someone earlier in the panel said, that what's being done in China, where it's like you optimize on what someone's really good at and bring in an outside organization to capitalize on that and allow it to grow. And so we've been like very excited to continue to partner. You guys were my first customer.
It was all my idea, by the way.
Well, good job.
So that's great. Thank you for those comments. So we've got 11 and a half minutes left. Why don't we open it up and see if there are any questions from the floor, and see if we can engage the panel in some other issues.
Here we go.
Alex, can you describe visually how your Wi-Fi charging will work?
Sure. Imagine that there's a pad that's on the ground. It can also be embedded in the ground for a public charging experience. There is a receiver about the size of a large hardcover book, maybe a little bit larger, that is integrated in the bottom of the vehicle by the automaker. And you just park the car, turn the car off, and walk away. That's all there is to it. And it's just as efficient as plugging in, so you're charging just as fast as if you're plugged in. So typically, you know, our systems, there's even a picture, thank you. Our systems are, you know, depending upon the car, delivering about 35 miles of range per hour of charging, just as if you had plugged in a level 2 cable. It's that simple. And where we get really excited now is we're working with some companies in autonomy. In fact, autonomous shuttle buses in our first deployment in China, where everywhere you're going to see autonomy is going to need autonomous charging. And so now the shuttle buses come and go and charge as they needed through the day.
Yeah, hi, thank you. This is a very quick question, which is, I wonder if any of you have had to start to engage directly with any of your electric distribution companies in any of the states in which you are operating, because bidirectionality sounds great. And, you know, if you're an electric distribution company, your eyes light up and you say, well, wait, I'm the electric distribution company. I'm the monopolist here. Nobody else can do that. So I'm curious if any of you have started to have interactions with your distribution companies, assuming that you're in Massachusetts or somewhere that has a deregulated industry.
I'm not in Massachusetts, but I can say from a perspective of someone who said that we don't need to work with utilities, utilities have become allies for us at itselectric, because what we're helping to do, as we've heard from other panelists this evening, is help with load distribution and load balance. So we're trying to encourage overnight charging. So we're trying to find ways for people to help electric companies offload that overnight inventory. So that's a huge opportunity. I'm here today, and what's happening in Brooklyn, where I normally am, is a conference called Dervos, which is obviously is what it sounds like. So there's a huge motion happening right now in terms of distributed energy resources, right? And EVs are the next part of that equation in terms of it being able to move energy and then deploy energy back into the grid. So utilities just need to look at EVs as assets for energy storage, and it's not an opposition.
I'm super curious.
Just Khaled was going to answer that question as well, and then we'll take your question.
So the answer is yes, and we work with utilities on their demand response programs. So one of my portfolio companies called Uplight, where through their software, first they engage with consumers, up to 65 million residential homes. So it's white labeled. You will not see it. You will think the software is powered by the utility, but it is powered by this company. And what they do is first you engage, you understand about your utility consumption patterns compared to neighbors, etc. The next one, you activate these consumers to start contributing by acquiring the biggest thing that they're subsidizing as utilities is a smart thermostat. And then you orchestrate them by enroll them in demand response programs. The next conversation that is happening now with several of them is about the bidirectional utilization of these behind-the-meter assets, whether it's your storage unit on the wall, electrical storage, or the bidirectional charging for with the vehicle batteries. It's a different level of advanced discussions based on the utility, but absolutely utilities are critical to the success of this whole journey.
Thanks. Yeah, go ahead, Sejal.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Utilities are very engaged and very interested in having EVs as a grid edge device for the reasons said. One of the main, economic benefit that they're looking at is it could potentially delay and or eliminate grid side infrastructure costs, which it's going to be a long process, but they're trying to figure out what could that play, what role could that potentially play, what role EVs could play in helping to alleviate some of that grid side infrastructure costs in the going into the future with capital investments now. And what they need today is to have that data that's coming from EVs, whether it's from the charger or whether it's coming from vehicle telematics, making sure that's accurate enough that they can use to bill customers and or rebate customers. So that's sort of where the industry, the utilities are thinking right now. And it's a very interesting conundrum because they're really not used to working with automakers, right? Like, as I talked about, it's energy and transportation coming together, and they're working that piece of it out now.
Add one thing, right? More storage means more renewables. Just fundamental. And, it was years ago that the EVs passed every other form of, battery production. I came out of the consumer electronics industry. I ran the notebook computer business for multiple companies. We got past years ago, and we're only at this much penetration of the car market with EVs so far. So, this is a way to tap an incredibly vast, millions of units of vehicles out there with storage, as opposed to investing in fixed grid storage to enable the mandated shift to renewables. So I think it just becomes a critical part of the mix.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question, please.
Thank you. Christina Lampione, Cadence Innovation. I am very curious I have helped bring some EVs to life as well as energy storage in general. And two considerations that I would love the panel's opinion on and your thoughts. One, electromagnetic radiation. You have high voltage or high current, you create systematized exposure to humans, and that is one. And two, to other electronics. We do already in containerized solutions have shields that have to be put up so communications doesn't get halted. You've had already a lot of exposure in this in high-tech industry. We work on this in Department of Defense all the time. What are the thoughts for society? Because these are unregulated, fairly large systems that are being put in place. And I don't know, but maybe you're aware, I haven't seen a lot of harmonized ideas on this. This is potentially a very, very big problem, but we could think about it now and potentially eliminate it totally.
Anybody want to take that?
I think the wireless guy should take that.
Yeah, no, I'll do a first pass at it. So I would challenge your premise that it's unregulated. The amount of time and energy as a design team that we spend on satisfying global regulations that do exist already is extraordinary. And it's actually part of our product differentiation is the amount of time and energy we focus on those systems and smart electrical design and shielding and grounding. And I wish I didn't have to worry about it. We'd probably had product in the market a year ago. But the rules exist. We satisfy, FCC and CISPR regulations in Europe and here in the States. So.
You don't think it's a problem, in other words? You think we have already figured out enough of this?
Well, I think that the regulations are pretty strict. We're bringing what's the most popular addition to kitchens around the world is an induction cooktop, right? And we don't want that to stop, right? We want to continue electrification. And the rules exist in the spectrum, in your electromagnetic interference and conduction back into the grid, and it's actually tough to satisfy, but those rules do exist.
We're down to about 2 minutes, so why don't we take another question over here, and then we have another one over there.
Hey there.
Well, let's go here.
I got it.
Okay.
Jeff Rossman, co-founder and CEO at Voltpost, where we're retrofitting lampposts into an EV charging platform. Came a little late into the event here, or maybe I've been in that last seat. as a few of the contemporaries here. But ultimately, my question is really around collaboration, recognizing that we're all developing things in silos. There's duplicative effort. And right now, we really need all the experts focused on these challenges ahead of us, and how can we foster better collaboration between all of the companies on this stage plus others in the general EV charging space right now, because there's just a lot of effort going into, frankly, building the same widget twice within each organization, where it could be much more done in the spirit of partnership, similar to the China example stated previously.
Yeah, I think at least the 3 organizations that I've seen that's been helpful in like facilitating that is definitely the ChargeX Consortium. Like my team, it's actually, there's a working group that like you have engineers doing work and tackling problems. And so that has been very helpful. The other definitely is MIT and the work that they've done and the collaboration there. And then the other is SAE International. They also have another working group that's looking at different codes. And the interesting thing about, at least specifically SAE, is that they've had to do this before. They did this within cars and planes, and so this is not a new problem. And so I think looking to those organizations and seeing how you can be a part of it is the best way to do it. And then also being open to data, like at ChargerHelp, like we will publish data and share data with what we're seeing in the field. I try to get out as much as possible to talk about the nuances. Everything I stated here today are like field interactions that we've observed. So yeah, those 3 organizations, I think getting connected with them, and then if you have interesting things, being able to share them, in opportunities such as this.
Thank you. You got a question? We have, we're at minus 10 seconds.
Minus 10 seconds. Tesla NAC standard, 5 years out. Does Tesla have a monopoly over supercharging networks in the United States, or what's that look like?
That was related to NACS. Is that?
Yeah, it's just that so many automakers are joining the Tesla standard now, and the Tesla experience is phenomenally better than every other EV. So where is this going? Is there Electrify Americas and all that? Are they going to be around?
I think they'll all be wireless by then, no?
Well, I would say Tesla has a good experience because it's vertically integrated. So
Yes,
once you start bringing in other softwares and other systems into their platform, you will not have the same experience. Oh, thank you, sir.
Software handshake's nightmare. We don't want, but as other automakers join that Tesla supercharger network, the software handshake issue doesn't go away. It's still a problem. Oh, that's.
Yeah, as I understand it, they're using CCS on those, even when you show up with another brand car, right? So it's CCS over NACS. But I would say I'd add to that all the makers of charging infrastructure independently are also adding that connector to their systems. So
that's a simpler thing to add for the connector itself.
Connector, right.
I'm not going to get paid my bonus if we run over by too much. So I want to ask everybody to please thank the panelists for.
Excellent.
And
Okay,
we'll turn it back to John.
Thank you so much. Just a quick word of guidance. I want to kind of point those who are interested in having a roundtable discussion around batteries toward this end of the room, and those who are interested in having a roundtable discussion around charging and other infrastructure toward this end of the room. So I'm thinking, Christina, you probably want to move that way. Mujib, move that way. The charging folks move this way. Thank you.